So, folks, we have to talk about what's been going on at Delaney Hall in New Jersey, right? This has been the next flashpoint, it seems, for backlash and organizing against ICE in America. And it has the attention now of both national press as well as members of Congress. And in particular, I want to give a shout out here to Andy Kim, who has been doing quite a bit on the front lines of this. You know, here he is in the local New Jersey press. ICE agents pepper spray protesters, New Jersey senator in clash outside Delaney Hall in Newark. Yeah, and ICE has, in fact, been, again, pepper spraying sitting members of Congress. Worth noting, I suppose. But Andy Kim writes here, my heart broke to see Americans fighting Americans in our streets yesterday. As I saw ICE agents tackling civilians and firing pepper balls into the crowd, I was overwhelmed by how broken we've become. We cannot normalize this violence. Here's what happened at Delaney Hall. I attempted to gain access to the detention center. Geo Group guards refused to let me in despite me having ICE approval. I had to call Secretary Mullen directly in order to finally gain access. So, to pause right here, a U.S. senator went to go exercise congressional oversight over an ICE facility, something they have the right upheld in federal court to do. And because this center is run by a private company, because he specifically notes here, Geo Group runs this facility, the company stooges wouldn't let him in anyway, even though he is a senator and even though it is the law. So he had to then call Secretary of Homeland Security Markwayne Mullin to be even allowed into the facility, which is absolute horseshit. Cannot stress that enough. He then goes on to say, the Geo Group manager called me a liar to my face when I said I had difficulty getting in. These for-profit companies are out of control and feel no accountability. And this is, again, one of the reasons I keep saying over and over again when talking about ICE in particular, that every single one of these private companies that is working with ICE, every single one of these private prison firms, every single one of their board of directors and their CEOs, their middle management, all the way down to their guards, all these people should be prosecuted. All of these people should be prosecuted for their role in facilitating these crimes, for their role in obstructing justice, for their role in obstructing members of Congress, for their role in torturing prisoners, for their role in enslaving members of the American public. It is truly, truly, truly heinous what they have done. And not a single one of them should be held innocent until they have seen justice in front of a court and a jury of their peers. Andy Kim goes on, dozens of detainees told me that they were being threatened with retaliation for their protesting. Now, I want to stop here and give you a little bit of background why all this is happening in the first place, which is that the people who have been incarcerated in Delaney Hall, ostensibly to be held for processing until they are deported, many of them have just been held indefinitely without any kind of trial, without any kind of court representation, etc. Like they've just been getting held in there. They organized together, along with folks on the outside, to do a hunger strike and a work stoppage. Because, of course, Geo Group is trying to put them to work, is trying to use them for forced labor within Delaney Hall. On top of that, they're doing the hunger strike. So they are refusing to eat food. They are refusing to do work. Excellent organizing, especially under unthinkable conditions. So that is what initially put Delaney Hall kind of on the map and on the, got attention for what was happening there. Because of these protests, because of the work stoppages, and because of the refusal to eat, they have been experiencing what I would describe as torture. You know, the prison guards are threatening to beat them or to retaliate in a myriad of other ways if they continue with this protest. Andy Kim continues, told that they would be transferred if they continued protesting. They kept telling me that they're these aren't empty threats and invoked the name Martin Soto, who was transferred out the day before. The detainees also told me about how the court system for them is a farce. They showed me a document that shows that a single judge has 74 cases before them in one day, one about every 5 minutes. This has caused many of them to be stuck in detention for 10 months or more. And this is where I remind you all that the big, beautiful bill that Donald Trump passed, ostensibly that included support for ICE and DHS and immigration services, included, among many other provisions, a cap on the number of immigration judges. And at the time, I noted that cap, and I told you guys that that cap was going to be used to basically form perpetual prisons for these private companies. And here in Delaney Hall, we have the exact example that I told you guys was going to form, which is people are being held indefinitely and they are being put to work by these private prisons that make a profit off of that labor. And there aren't enough immigration judges to actually process any of these cases. So what winds up happening is they just don't get processed and just get held forever because there's no set amount of time in which they have to be processed. So continuing on here. When I exited the center, my staff told me there's been a major escalation. I saw a large line of ICE agents staring down a line of protesters. I walked in the space between asking for the head of the ICE contingent. Now, this is notable because it's worth remembering Andy Kim alone is allowed to go into that facility to facilitate, congressional oversight. His staff was not allowed to go in with him. So after that, ICE told Andy Kim they needed to secure access to the driveway. I told them their tactics were only making things worse. Eventually, ICE told me they were going to move the armed agents out. I told them they cannot just plow through a crowd of civilians. I asked if we could try and broker an arrangement that would keep people safe. Before I could secure agreement, ICE said they are moving out now. I asked for more time. They started their engines. The armed agents pushed through the crowd, throwing several people onto the street. I ran over and stood between the ICE convoy and the crowd, trying to keep physical separation to prevent even more serious harm. And here's actually a picture of him trying to do that, which, I want to note is fairly brave. He's not invulnerable, and he knows that ICE has killed people. He's putting himself between forces that could cause him extreme harm. The last vehicle had an agent with a pepperball gun, and he started firing at our feet and passed me towards the crowd. The back and forth grew worse as water bottles were thrown and pepper balls and pepper spray were used. I kept yelling, "Stop, it doesn't have to be this way." Finally, the vehicles drove away and all the chaos came to an abrupt hush. What was left in the aftermath felt surreal. Many walked back towards the main site in a fresh daze. Some were receiving care from medics. I walked over to flush my own eyes as the burning from the pepper spray in my eyes and throat was getting worse. As I looked onto hundreds of people still in shock in front of the detention facility, I asked, what's next? The violence we saw yesterday could happen again today or tomorrow. I pray it doesn't, but all the conditions are there. The tactics of mass transfers and other escalatory actions will only further the tensions. We need to focus on solving the problem, but here's what's standing in the way. It won't be easy for ICE and Geo Group to improve, or it would be easy for ICE and Geo Group to improve the conditions in the detention center. They could hire more doctors, but that's less profit for Geo Group. They could have better food or fix the extreme heat, but that's less profit. And in a few days, Republicans in the Senate will try and push forward tens of billions of dollars for more money to ICE with zero reforms and accountability. They won't spend $1 to help with your health care, grocery bills, or gas. That's the choice before America right now. I choose to help the people, all of us.
I know it's not remotely the point, but it is refreshing to see an elected representative with a properly fitting suit. The Trump psychos have ruined it.
That's true, though I will note he does get some points knocked off for the fact that his pants are navy, but his suit coat is black. Just bad combo. But it does fit him, so that is a plus. Thank you for the fit check, Sake Tanuki, and the 5 tier 1 subs. Andy Kim writes, I choose to help people, all of us. I want Americans to voice their outrage as we did after the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. Let's work to stop this legislative giveaway to ICE in the coming weeks. The lawlessness that continues must end. So that's kind of where Andy Kim was the other day. But he's far from the only member of Congress who is actually showing up to document what is happening at Delaney Hall. Here's Representative Frank Pallone, a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, showing up outside of Delaney Hall a couple days ago.
This place needs to be closed down. These people need to be free. I'm here at Delaney Hall with my colleagues Nellie Poe and Senator Kim. The conditions are absolutely outrageous. This place needs to be closed down. These people need to be free. They were screaming liberty. The conditions are terrible. First of all, the food is terrible. They showed me food that they had been given that actually was moldy. They can't see a doctor. If they request a doctor, it takes 4 to 7 days before they even have an opportunity to see a doctor. There's a lack of due process. On a given day like tomorrow, there may be 75 cases before one judge, so they don't even get to be heard. I talked to people that have been here for a year and a half. I talked to people who, most of them have families. The bottom line is that they should be released. This place should be shut down. There's no way to correct these conditions. And this whole detaining people who really haven't done anything wrong is completely outrageous and has to stop.
That's fairly good, right? Like, more members of Congress coming out and saying these facilities are just outright evil and they need to stop is really important. But I think it's worth noting that video was uploaded on May 25th. Here's a video uploaded from today, also from Representative Frank Pallone. And a little bit more detail here as he's become more familiar with the facility.
I came to Delaney Hall Detention Center again today because constituents had informed me some of the people that are detained here had been beaten up and were taken to the hospital because of ICE. I came and I had an opportunity to talk to a number of people, again, both men and women, but the Unit 2, where this incident occurred with the detainees that were taken to the hospital, was locked down. But we did talk.
Now, we'll circle back around to what he's talking about here. The incident that he's talking about in particular is ICE agents apparently beating a group of prisoners to the point that they had to be taken to the hospital. Again, in retaliation for their ongoing strike.
To other people who related what they had heard, which was, in fact, that some of the detainees, specifically 4, had been taken to the hospital. But I also want to mention that the situation here just gets worse every day. And so women who are here said that they were supposed to have a hearing before a judge on their case, and it was canceled because they were protesting. Others said that the women had been taken away because they were protesting or transferred out of Delaney Hall. But in addition to that, we talked again to many people. Some of the most serious cases today were the fact that there was a woman who had a miscarriage and she was transferred out. And there are other cases now where we have women that are pregnant and the concern is whether they're getting proper treatment. I also spoke to some other men who are detained who also have really serious medical conditions. One was scheduled to have an operation, and now the operation has been postponed several months. And the fact that this incident occurred where 4 inmates had to be taken to the hospital is just another indication of how bad the conditions are here. So let me just say this once again, as I've said before, this place needs to be closed down. The conditions are horrible. You can't get due process. You can't see a doctor on any kind of regular basis. The reality is that that ICE and the Department of Homeland Security refuse to recognize what's really happening here and are trying to ship people out that are telling the stories. So we'll be back here again, but the place needs to be closed.
And I just want to say hats off to these members of Congress who are actually doing really vital work. They are some of the only people who can go into the facility talk with these people and bring their stories out. What they're describing is an ongoing and persistent effort, a systemic effort by ICE to cover up what is happening. That's why they're doing mass transfers between different facilities. They don't want these people being able to share their stories. That's exactly what's happening. And so members of Congress going in and getting those stories and bringing them out is an incredibly important thing. I want to be very clear that these people are doing some very vital work as members of Congress, right? Andy Kim in particular, again, shout out to him. He collaborated with Mother Jones here, saying nothing's improved since Minnesota except private prison profits. He basically, which is accurate, right? Like, these facilities are being run for profit. It is a massive, massive, massive handout to private prison corporations, because those private prisons make massive amounts of money from the federal government, from these contracts. And then what happens, right? What happens with that money? Well, the government just gives that money to these facilities. And then the facilities, because they're being run for profit, have every incentive in the world to cut down on the actual costs of having the number of people inside of their facilities, right? That means taking in more people into their facilities than their facilities are built to handle. It means cutting electricity use. It means cutting food costs. It means cutting medical care. And you might be wondering, hey, why is it so hard for people in ICE custody to get doctors? Well, we actually already know the answer to that. I've talked about it extensively in the past, but ICE has not paid for detainee medical care for 7 months. And that was back in May. They still haven't been paying for detainee medical care. They still aren't doing that. So the reason it takes so long to get a doctor is because there aren't any doctors being paid by ICE. Like, there is a systemic disregard for human life and human safety throughout all of this process, at every step. This piece by Jude Legum in Popular Info. Yeah, October 3rd of 2025, the Trump administration abruptly stopped paying third parties for medical care provided to detainees in the custody of ICE. Third-party providers are used to provide medically necessary care, including dialysis, prenatal care, oncology, and chemotherapy. Now, a document posted to an official government contracting website by ICE on November 12th described the situation as an absolute emergency that needed to be resolved immediately to prevent any further medical complications or loss of life. And according to ICE, those payments were supposed to resume on April 30th of 2026. They did not. So when we're talking about people in ICE custody who are being held indefinitely in terrible conditions that are deliberately crafted to cause illness, they're not spending money to treat these people. It's why you get so many stories about miscarriages coming out of these ICE facilities. It's because they're being tortured and denied medical care. In the rare examples where they're actually putting people on stretchers and taking them out of the facility, it's because those people have been extraordinarily injured and there's nobody on site to properly care for them. And I mean, it's not unique, right? Here's the New Jersey Monitor talking about more about Andy Kim's experience. What I witnessed was really heartbreaking. Just seeing Americans fighting other Americans in the streets, the level of division. And it's not just that. It's what I heard and saw inside the detention facility. Kim said he is alarmed after speaking over the long weekend with dozens of the 700 plus detainees held at the facility, describing a pregnant woman who's not receiving medical attention and a detainee who's been hospitalized for 2 weeks with her family unable to find out any details. They said they can't divulge that information because of security purposes, he said. Kim said he was told family members can file public information requests to get information about their loved ones. I mean, that's absurd, he said. So let's just clarify what that means, right? What that means is if someone gets sick or injured in ICE custody, ICE doesn't actually alert anyone outside of the incarceral system that they have created, right? It means if your loved one is injured or sick or dying while in ICE custody, you might not ever know. And the only way you would know is if you could get no information and then you decided to file one of these public information requests, which again is only really applicable if they haven't moved facilities, which they very well could have, because ICE isn't telling you shit. All of this is a veil of secrecy to cover up what ICE is doing. I want to talk about this because protesters have also been getting assaulted by ICE officers. Here is a content creator who was protesting outside of Delaney Hall, who goes by Who is King Triv, and here is his experience as somebody assaulted by ICE during protest.
After talking to a lawyer, I'm allowed to say a little bit. I'm going to the hospital, but I was strangled. I was hit in the face. I was thrown to the ground. I was OC sprayed. I was dragged. So I can't really lift my left shoulder up too much. My wrists are fucked up. I got a limp. My face is swollen. My glasses are broken. My lips fucked up. So that's where I'm allowed to say that. So yeah.
Let's be very clear. ICE is assaulting protesters. ICE is assaulting both the protesters outside the facility, but also the people who are on hunger strike inside the facility. They're assaulting them as well. People were observing 4 different people taken out on stretchers the other day because of this apparently mass assault that occurred within the facility against these protesters as retaliation. Here's Andy Kim on CNN.
There is a hunger strike and a broader protest that's happening both amongst the women and the men inside. I went on Saturday. I was actually able to go in yesterday. They initially denied me, but I had to actually call Secretary Markwayne Mullin personally to be able to gain entry. And I continue to hear of the poor conditions. I mean, I heard from a woman who's pregnant who's saying that she's not able to get medical care. Yesterday, I talked to a man that has stage 3 lung cancer that's not getting the medical care that he needs. A gentleman handed me, a detainee handed me a carton of milk. And I looked at it and it was just congealed solid. I mean, it was absolutely disgusting. But beyond just the conditions, they were also saying they're not able to get their day in court. You know, many of them have been stuck there 8 months, 10 months, 12 months at the cost to the American people. And they showed me this document that shows that today, this Tuesday, that one judge had 74 cases before them in court. I mean, it shows just how broken and how much of a farce of a system it is when they get no more than 5 minutes maximum to be able to really make their case.
It's truly some rancid conditions going on in there. And I want to highlight that the protesters doing their hunger strike within Delaney Hall have very limited options to communicate to the outside world. However, some ways that they have been able to do this is by putting out letters. So we have a number of different letters. Here is one example from inside Delaney Hall. All right. Communique. We, the detainees at the Delaney Hall Detention Facility, wish to express our objection to the violation of our rights as immigrant human beings. We, the detainees, are demanding our progressive release based on the fact that our arrests were illegal. Immigrants to this country have the right to await our pending immigration proceedings outside of prison. Therefore, we demand to be released on bond or parole so that we may complete our proceedings. Furthermore, we call for greater efficiency in our judicial processes, as well as greater effectiveness and urgency for those who request and sign their voluntary release. We believe it is unjust to keep people who wish to leave of their own free will in custody for up to 3 months. In addition to the unlawful and forced detention of most of us who find ourselves locked up here, there is the inhumane treatment that all detainees in this facility endure on a daily basis. The company in charge, Geo Group, fails to meet the basic conditions necessary to protect our health and our lives. To their administrative incompetence, we must add the following injustices and irregularities perpetrated by ICE and Geo. Food containing worms or in a state of decay, unresolved issues, particularly regarding bathrooms, which are in terrible and inhumane condition, ventilation problems. And it continues on. Serious health issues. Most people have a persistent flu with phlegm that won't go away. Many have conjunctivitis, urinary tract infections, fevers, and coughs. Medical care issues. If you're sick, you have to submit a request that takes 2 weeks to be answered, or you never get a response at all. Nurses refuse to treat you right away. They only prescribe Tylenol for all ailments. The nurse's exact words, "We're not a pharmacy." ICE agents coerce detainees into signing deportation orders. There is no emergency protocol. In cases of falls or attacks, emergency response arrives an hour late. Judges' rulings are highly questionable. Most bond requests are denied without legal basis. Detainees are forced to work, in most cases without pay or for $1 an hour. Like, that is slavery conditions. Slavery conditions are being described here. We appreciate the support of everyone who is protesting outside the facility. We want you to know that you give us the strength and determination to keep going. Please don't give up. We ask all relevant authorities for an urgent response and look forward to hearing from them. With the utmost respect, the detainees at the Delaney Hall facility. God bless you. It's a lot. If you are interested in reading additional letters, you can find them here. I will link it in chat, and we'll also link it in the show notes. Links to the additional letters are at the bottom of the page. And yeah, protesters are continuing to, fight the good fight outside the facility. Here's an example of how things were a couple days ago. They've only grown since then. These are protesters, by the way, trying to prevent a transfer from happening. One of those attempts to hide what's happening by shuffling around prisoners.
Watch the head! Go!
Just want to say, like, these fucking cowards, man. Look at him. Look at him. Reaching for his fucking gun. Absolute fucking cowards.
Go!
This is outside the Delaney Hall facility. And worth noting also, this has gone to local government as well. Here's a statement from Ras Baraka. For the past year, the city has been engaged in litigation with the GEO Group due to its failure to comply with municipal ordinances when it began operating Delaney Hall. Our concerns remain unresolved as critical city agencies, including the Health Department, Fire Division, and Code Enforcement, have repeatedly been denied access to inspect the facility, which, just as an FYI, if you're denying local officials basic inspection, oh God, you are doing some fucked up shit in there. You are doing some fucked up shit in there. You're not letting the health department or the people who assess for fire hazards or for, like, building codes into the facility. Like, you're doing some fucked up shit in there. While we have pursued this matter through the courts, Geo Group has continued to operate a facility marked by deeply troubling incidents. These include the collapse of a wall resulting in a security breach. Yeah, again, when we're talking about code enforcement, that like just basic building codes, basic structural integrity. The death of a detainee while in custody, and an ongoing hunger strike by detainees. These concerns are further substantiated by letters smuggled out by detainees themselves, which provide firsthand accounts of serious humanitarian and constitutional violations. The letters describe alarming health conditions, including widespread illness, flu outbreaks, and the denial of necessary medical treatment for chronic and life-threatening conditions such as HIV, cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. Detainees also report inadequate and poor quality food, compounding these dangerous and inhumane conditions. In light of these alarming reports, we are going to request assistance from the governor to empower the Attorney General to immediately investigate the Delaney Hall. This should include, but is not limited to, its certificate of occupancy, compliance with state and local regulations, and the conditions of detainees housed there. I also call for a full and independent inspection by the Department of Health to assess the facility's conditions and ensure compliance with public health and safety standards, with periodic inspections to ensure compliance moving forward. It's imperative that we take all necessary steps to uphold the rule of law, ensure accountability, and protect the dignity and rights of some of the most vulnerable individuals in our care. I do think this is a fairly decent statement. However, I do want to say that when we're talking about this, we've already reached the crisis point. Like, we cannot afford to wait when we're talking about these facilities. When we are talking about this, how could these facilities be shut down sooner? Well, if I'm the mayor and I'm looking at all options on the table, start cutting off utilities. Start cutting off utilities. Start actually taking actions that make it impossible for these people to operate within city limits. You have the ability to do that. You can operate alongside the governor to, for example, remove Geo Group's right to conduct business activities within the state of New Jersey. Like that's something you could do. There needs to be actions. There needs to be policies. There needs to be things that you are going to do, not just, hey, we'll get the Attorney General of the state on it, because there's already pending legal action. You already described that there's pending legal action. That's great. There needs to be more than that. What can you do? Like, I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, but maybe the roads around Delaney Hall need to be undergo some pretty extreme forms of maintenance. So they need to be blocked off. Oops, sorry, you're going to have to escort people several blocks if they want to go in or out of the facility. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. There are things that communities can do. And I know that because there have been examples of AI data centers that get water cut off to them or electricity cut off to them. There are examples of places that have taken a harder stance on these facilities. It just kind of seems to me like there are things and options available to you. Like, if medical care is not being provided, do everything in your power to get doctors into that facility, to get medicine into that facility.
Unironically.
Yeah, like enforce permit violations. Start having local cops tail ICE officials, and if they park illegally, have them get ticketed. I don't know, be irritating as fuck. Marshal your forces and inconvenience them by all means. This, but unironically, true. Yeah, honestly, it would be a crazy good move. Just you erect a toll road specifically around the Delaney ICE facility. So every ICE vehicle that goes through needs to pay a toll that goes directly to funding the municipal coffers. Genuinely, I do think that is something that should be considered. Like, if they have the ability to do so. Yeah, like, channel the pettiness of, like, the kinds of people who show up to every single municipal meeting. Because, like, and I guess I am kind of, like, getting a little bit jokey here, but this is a deeply serious issue. When we talk about it, you know, like, there are incidents happening across the nation. Look at this. This story here really, I think, should give everybody pause. U.S. citizens stopped in Lafayette, shackled and detained in Louisiana ICE facility. The U.S.-born woman presented ICE and Lafayette sheriff's deputies with her state-issued ID and social security card. ICE detained her anyway. Because the thing is, we have created a system where there is a powerful, unaccountable force in our country that is armed, that is masked, that is empowered to detain anybody and everybody they feel is speaking up against them or being too uppity or, you know, being, you know, in need of, like, that white supremacist violence. And they are using that power to those ends, right? Like, they are effectively acting as, like, modern day slave catchers to bring to privatized enslavement facilities. On top of that, you have set up a system whereby even if a US citizen is a citizen and has all the documentation on them needed to prove they are a citizen, all an ICE agent has to do is say, I think that's fake. And then you're fucked. You're absolutely fucked. Because if they just look at your evidence and say, not good enough, then they have created a system where if you get put into that category of non-citizen, they can do anything to you. They can beat you. They can deny you medical care. They can rip you from your family. They can force you to do slave labor. And that's where we're at right now. Right? That's where we're at. And it is also worth noting Delaney Hall is not the only example of this. Here's Oliver Larkin for Congress, right? Sharing a message from what's going on in Florida.
That people are starting to call this a modern day concentration camp. Would you agree with that statement?
Listen, it is as bad as it can be, but it is not a concentration camp. And people should not use Holocaust references to describe what's going on behind us.
People shouldn't use Holocaust references to describe what's going on behind us, right? That's Jared Moskowitz, by the way. Here's an actual Democrat, Maxwell Frost, getting out of Alligator Alcatraz.
I just got out of Alligator Alcatraz and I have a binder full of notes. Here's what I learned. First off, one of the main reasons I went is because all of you've heard, it's closing down. But the governor and Trump are not admitting it. They're giving conflicting messages. And I think part of the reason is because they spent $1 billion. That's $1 million a day of it being opened to operate the facility using our taxpayer money. And the whole thing is a failure. And I think it's embarrassing. And so they don't want to admit that it's being shut down less than a year later. But I can tell you that they're not being truthful because what I saw is a facility that is being wound down and shut down. First off, they're not getting any new people. They're just sending people to other facilities. There are 655 folks in it right now, when just a few weeks ago, there were 1,400 people. And in fact, even while I was there, I saw a flight get loaded up with people and sent to another facility. There were 2 flights scheduled for today alone. The other thing is, the first 2 times I went to this facility, the processing center was packed with people being processed and staff, and it was like chaotic. And this time there was nobody in there. I mean, there was maybe like 2 or 3 staff people in there. It was completely silent, and a lot of the offices looked like it had been cleared out. Plus the staff kept using words like, you know, decompressing or we're unwinding and stuff like that. They said everything but this place is shutting down. Now, why is this important? 2 reasons. This is important because we can't allow this place to just shut down and then not talk about it anymore. That's what they want, because they used $1 billion of our dollars to enrich private contractors that built and operated the place. They want us to move on because they don't want us to talk about the human rights abuses and civil rights abuses.
Yeah, like, I mean, that is kind of what Republicans are banking on right now. Republicans are banking on Democrats having deliberately short memories. Because a lot of Democrats in power, they also want to have some kind of escape from any kind of culpabilities, right? Like, if they do something that breaks the law, they also don't want to be held accountable for it, right? But we're kind of in a position in a time right now where that doesn't fly anymore. And Democrats are going to have to get used to the idea pretty quick that both Democrats and Republicans need to be held responsible and accountable for the actions that they take. If those actions are corrupt, if those actions are illegal, they need to be prosecuted. And that goes for Republicans too. Like, you cannot claim we are a nation of laws and that we value law and order and then not enforce the laws when powerful people break them. Maxwell Frost is 100% correct. Republicans are banking on Democrats being just as corrupt as Republicans. And so that Democrats will just magically forget that these concentration camps happened. Magically forget to have any accountability for the people who tortured folks. Who tortured folks in concentration camps in 2026. We can't allow that.
That happened there and in other facilities as well. So by going here, not only do we keep the story alive, but I'm telling you guys, this is not going to end with it being shut down. We have to continue to push for accountability and consequences for people who broke the law and misused our money. And when I say misuse our money, I mean use the money meant for hurricane preparedness to kidnap and cage our neighbors. I just got out of Alligator.
I do like that a sitting member of Congress, at the very least, Maxwell Frost, is out there saying, we gotta have accountability. Because I've been saying that for a while. The only way to restore trust in the American government is to have that accountability. And it needs to be public. There need to be like public trials. They need to be televised 24/7. It needs to happen in order to restore any kind of semblance of trust in the government. And to be very clear, the earlier clip was of Jared Moskowitz. Oliver Larkin is campaigning for Congress right now, and in Florida. So, just as an FYI, we do need to take a quick look here, because what's going on, for example, in Minnesota, right? If Alligator Alcatraz is being wound down, what's going on in Minnesota? And the Minnesota Reformer had a really interesting piece that came out about a week ago, where they had a journalist go through 1,100 habeas corpus petitions that they were able to get their hands on. And they were able to identify from those petitions 273 people with valid work permits who are arrested by immigration authorities during the immigration crackdown of Operation Metro Surge. And also, the journalists believe that is actually an undercount based on pressure tactics from ICE and DHS to get people to voluntarily self-deport. And that is also taking into account that not every immigrant detained has the means or ability to file a habeas petition. A huge percentage of the people that were scooped up in Operation Metro Surge, people who were kidnapped, people who were abducted by men in masks and with guns, were people who were here working legally. That's basically the findings here. Again, the people responsible for this need to be prosecuted. It cannot be acceptable in this country that masked men from the government abuse their power and take away the freedoms that people have as a fundamental right in this country on a whim, because they look Latino, or they speak Spanish, or they're not speaking American. There needs to be accountability for this. Yeah, the era of letting things go for unity must be over. There can be no unity when this type of lawlessness has been allowed to flourish. Also worth noting here that when we talk about lawlessness, it truly is lawless, right? Here is one of the folks from LA Taco, which I want to remind everyone was a food website until ICE happened. And then it transitioned into a news website. Here is LA Taco talking about the latest ICE tactic. And it's worth taking this into account as you go about your daily lives, as you interact with other people in your communities, okay? Here you go.
We need to talk about the unintended consequences of using the Know Your Rights red cards, these right here. I'm also going to update you on the ongoing hunger strikes and the raids. Today is Thursday, May 28th, day 357 since the raid started. Let's first talk about these red cards. These are fantastic little red cards, don't get me wrong, by the ILRC, the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. They're printed in about 59 different languages to inform immigrants about their rights. But there's been a downside. On the grounds of responders have been reporting that folks being questioned by ICE are being immediately detained after these folks pull out the Know Your Rights red cards. ICE sees them and just makes the immediate assumption that the people trying to use these cards are undocumented. And, well, essentially, these have become little red targets. If you or someone you know is using these Know Your Rights red cards, do not show them to the agents because they will automatically arrest you. You should learn them. You should actually read them and memorize the valuable information and the rights written on them because these are really essential, but don't try to use them as a shield. I've personally seen videos where these red cards are found on the floor after someone gets taken. So please tell your folks to be careful.
Yeah, worth noting that. Let the people in your life know that this could, in fact, paint a huge target on their back. Yeah, it is good. It is good to pass them out, but make sure that the people who are taking them learn the information on the card. Do not show it to ICE officers. It is not a get out of jail free card. You can't just show that to an officer and expect them to read it or care. And in fact, if you do show it to an officer, you should expect to get detained by ICE. That doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it remotely legal that they're able to do that. But that is what they will do. Worth noting. I want to end on that note because we're in a scary time. ICE is in many ways escalating their activities. There are still a number of prosecutions working through the federal system against anti-ICE protesters. There is still a target on the back of people who are taking actions against ICE to keep their communities safe. And I am still a proponent here that one of the best things you can do right now is get involved with your local political system, right? You can get involved with your local city, town politics. Join your local Dems, join your local DSA, okay? But when you get involved, you can do things like shred those 287G agreements between your local sheriff's department and ICE. Make sure your local police are not collaborating with ICE agents. You know, if there is a local ICE detention facility, you can work with your local political establishment in order to try and bring that facility. You do not have to actually tolerate these facilities being in existence in your neighborhoods, in your town, in your city. You can take action on the local level to use the levers of political power most available to you to shut these places down. There's no reason, especially if you care deeply about this issue, to not show up at those meetings and bring up the issue and see what can be done with other like-minded people in your community, okay? Our long-term goal, of course, is accountability, prosecute every ICE agent, shut down every ICE facility. That is a long-term goal. Alongside, ICE must be destroyed. It needs to be completely, broken out of government, and we need to do something different instead. Because what is happening right now is completely unacceptable. It is outright fascism. I live in Minneapolis. I've seen them driving around with their masks on and their guns out. I live near where Alex Preddy and Renee Good were killed in the street. We're not that far removed from that. And in some ways, it's gotten worse. So continue to organize, continue to do what is right, continue to stand against fascism. And folks, again, join your local political orgs. If you need help, join our Discord. Reach out to GamerG for help with DSA. Reach out to Dragonfly for help with your local Dems. And we'll help you get started. We'll help you figure out where to go, who to talk to, how to talk to them. We'll give you the tips. And hopefully by getting involved, you can leverage more power against these facilities, against these ICE agents, than you could just by your lonesome. So all that being said, folks, if you got anything out of this, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment. Let me know what has been moving and shaking, what's been effective when it comes to organizing against ICE in your area. You know, we can share tips and tricks in the comments, of course. And also, folks, check out ImogeneOlivia.com, gender euphoric lingerie designed from the ground up for trans femmes, also tested with cis men, cis women, non-binary folks. It is comfortable, sexy lingerie that is non-tucking. Check it out, ImogeneOlivia.com. Link down in the description. Let's keep on going.
Fruitable Jack is going to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube is where she streams. All that content is bursting the seams. Politics, dating, plenty more. Her sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord.